You're listening to Law and Coder, a Hike 2 powered podcast that explores the intersection of technology and law to help you navigate the fast changing world of legal tech.
Hey, welcome back to Long Coder. I'm the co-host Morgan Llewellyn, and with me as always, we've got Christina Natali. Christina, it's been a couple weeks since we've recorded our last session. Our last session, we had a great one with Emily Rushing, where we were really talking about, data transformation. We've got an exciting one coming up next with Rachel Shield Williams, where we're going to be talking about the evolving role of CRM. But today, we've got an amazing guest. We've got Liv Smith with us, and we're going to be talking about, human-centered design. I mean, Christina, why are you excited for today? What should folks be expecting about today's podcast?
I'm really excited about today. Like you said, I feel like coming from my legal background and probably from your innovation background as well, I don't think, and like, correct me if I'm wrong as always, I don't think I had like ever really even heard of human-centered design before I came to Hike 2. And not just because of working at Hike 2, but also working with our clients. I don't think that I had even heard of it. And yet, when I think about the work that we do and the ways that we've been able to kind of bridge some of the divides between law and technology and people who are non-technical, it's because of, even if you don't know that you're doing it, it's because of human-centered design, which I think is so cool.
I can't argue with you there. I definitely think it is something, especially as we go more into automation, right? And we think more about bots. We've really, kind of understood the need to keep the human in the loop, as it were, and that need for human-centered design. I guess all design used to be human-centered design, but now actually we have to be a little bit more purposeful in making it human-centered. So yeah, no, I think you're spot on.
I love that. With that, we're so excited about our guest today, our colleague and frequent collaborator, Liv Smith. Liv, are you here with
Yeah,
us? Hi.
I'm here. So excited to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. For our listeners, Liv is the Director of Human-Centered Design here at Hike 2. She empowers organizations to transform technology with people at the center, which is going to be what we're talking about today. She's partnered with executive teams across all sectors that we work with here at Hike 2, including specifically legal, but also other highly regulated industries, financial services, SaaS, and government, and designed human-centered strategies that facilitate change and drive digital innovation. Hi, Liv.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that great intro.
Absolutely. We're so excited. Why don't you before we dive into our topic, human-centered design, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of your journey here and how you found yourself in this role with, human-centered design in the title? How did you even find out that that was a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So even Christina, you saying that whenever you kind of entered into this space, you'd never even heard of human-centered design. And I think that's because similar to AI, human-centered design as that title is fairly new. When I was in school, we weren't having human-centered conversations. We were just having conversations around design. And I first joined a human-centered design practice in 2019 and really learned about what is it that we're doing? What does HCD mean? And we've seen this practice applied to so many different industries, like you said. But really at its core, to me, human-centered design is just understanding the users. It's going in, asking somebody how they do their process and watching how they do their process. We often find that the way somebody explains it versus the way that they actually do it are very, very different. We dig deep into what is a pain point, where in their work or what they're doing is causing hurdles or causing extra time in their day-to-day process. And we look for opportunities. So sometimes there are huge champions and innovators and those who are sitting in their chairs always thinking about the next thing or how to make their process more streamlined or faster, really staying innovative at its core. And we go and we lean on those people. We talk to them. We take the best practices that we know about, and we apply it all together to put together these end solutions for them that will, really tie back to the business values and the business priorities.
Do you feel like you said 2019 and now I'm sitting here like I think about I went from working fully in an office in Houston, Texas, practicing law to move to Washington, D.C. and, sat on my couch every day and sat on conference calls. I feel like that must have been such an interesting time to be diving into this world of human-centered design, right? I mean, everybody had their workflow disrupted, whether they knew it or not.
Right, right. I'm so grateful that I got that pre-COVID background of what is human-centered design and how do we do this in person. I mean, it's most successful when we're sitting in the room, we're watching you work, we get to see, body language, facial expressions when you're talking about your work. But then, we flipped it on its head, and in 2020, we went totally virtual. So we had to relearn, what does human-centered design mean behind a screen? How are we doing all of those same things that we were able to in person? We used to stand behind somebody sitting at their desk and literally just watch them do their work. We would look at the Post-its on their desk. We would look at the notes, the pens, the things that they were doing. And now we've had to learn and ask those questions verbally. Okay, tell me about your desk. Are you using a notes app on your laptop? Are we using Excel spreadsheets? It's those types of things that people don't realize that are actually huge parts of their processes whenever we go in to talk to them about a specific system. They don't even think about what they're doing outside of their system. So yeah, relearning how to control those conversations and pull out those details has been super interesting. And I feel like at this point we've really gotten it down to figure out how to do it.
That's really great kind of accent. As always, we kind of just have conversations here, but we sort of move into this flow that makes sense. And where we usually start is like, what was it like before this? Like, was it even a consideration? Were we even thinking about what are people doing? What is their current way of working before we throw this new technology at them? Could you speak a little bit about kind of what it was like before this?
Yeah, definitely. I think there was this boom of, at the beginning, everyone was making very, very customized tools for their skill sets and what like specifically they were doing. And then we saw the boom of off-the-shelf products, and these were very niche, one-off kind of, if you have this problem, buy this product. And people were going crazy. The IT departments were throwing their budgets at this because they would hear about one problem and then solution for it and buy that tool. We're now on the other end of that problem where it's people have too many tools that are, starting to overlap. I think especially with cloud, there's product updates and there's software updates where new capabilities are happening within these tools, and there's overlap where you have 5 tools that can all do the same thing, and nobody knows because there's only one guy working in the back of the office who is using that tool. So it's causing a lot of tech debt, and we're, really, as we're moving into the present, trying to undo a lot of the things that were done in that, kind of wallet happy throwing their money at different tools.
So do you see, I think that's really interesting. Do you see more human-centered design? I don't know if you want to call it opportunities or just need, kind of at that initial selection process? Or is it really, well, no, most firms are now in this position where they've got too much, and it's how do they kind of unravel that mess that they have? Like, where do you see, more need for human-centered design? Do you get ahead of it, or do you just address what you have currently?
I think you need to address the problem, but also put governance in place for how we're going to move forward. It's almost like figure out the governance, address the problem, see where we can kind of delete some of these tools, stop paying for them, transfer over to the new best in class solution that we're going to all be using. And then really apply that governance. So there's a way to vet all of these tools and go in. Once you understand what it is that your people need, then it's easier to find that right tool. But if you're only talking to a small set of people who have a very similar problem, then yeah, there is going to be a tool out there, usually off the shelf, that will help address that one specific need. But if you were to talk to those 3 people a little bit deeper, you would understand that they have 25 more problems, and maybe it's the other tool that's going to solve more of their problems. So it really is kind of more bang for your buck.
It sounds like, and Liv, I know that you're a friend of and fan of the podcast. As you know, we sometimes also, wherever it strikes us, we try to point out our risk to avoid, risk to consider, risk to embrace. And it feels like maybe you're talking about our risk to avoid today. Is there something that you feel like, as the purchaser, the buyer, the decision maker, what would you say is the biggest kind of risk to avoid in making that purchasing select decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the risk to avoid is trying to buy a product that is one size fits all. So going out, talking to everyone, grabbing pain points here and there, and being like, okay, I think this will solve for most of the people. Or we can try to, rework workflows into this one tool when really, we have to assess, is that the best solution? Especially whenever we're looking at larger firms who have multiple practice groups with multiple problems or multiple processes that really don't overlap. We can't be buying tools that will work for everyone because it's not natural and it's not the way that the workflows are going right now.
Morgan, I feel like we've, all three of us, and probably on projects we've worked on together, but I feel like we can all think of examples where we've come in to work with a client that's already selected and built and implemented a technology, and literally on the first day of live training of their team, they're explaining to them, this is why we selected this tool for you, and it's going to change your life and make everything better. And it's like they have no idea, like nobody's even told them before that something was selected. Like, can you think of any examples of that, Morgan, or am I just
I would go one step further, because I think we see this in legal, maybe more so than in any other industry that I've ever seen before, is the purchasing of tools that are never even implemented, never even make it to pilot phase. And, I think really what that speaks to is what Liv's talking about, is we're not taking into consideration, broader legal, we're not always taking into consideration those greater user needs. And that's kind of why it's dying on the vine, where we rush out, we hear a problem, we rush out, we buy a tool, but we haven't done the due diligence before that purchase to make sure that we've done that. Because I agree, but I think it's almost worse than what you're saying. Of there's a lot of tools I've heard get purchased that never even make it to pilot or first implementation.
No, that's a really good point. Thinking about kind of where it's going, right? Which is going to be our next question preview for Liv, so she can get ready. Right? Is where do we see this going, and where can it be successful? And, I know we talked a bit with Emily last time on the pod about, people and culture coming first, stepping back and assessing, like, what are we about here? What are we teaching our people that we're about, our clients that we're about, and how do we get there? It sounds like that taking that step back before you're even selecting, thinking about both, maybe it's like a fork in the road, but both are important. You've got this path that's selection criteria. What do we actually need? And another path that's, I feel like, where I'm going, and maybe Liv, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but you touched on a bit: adoption, utilization, return on investment. Is it even going to be worth it? What Morgan was kind of saying, this, like, if we buy this, are we even going to deploy it to our users? And even if we do, are they actually going to use it?
Right.
Well, I think I guess, kind of talking to one of my favorite talking points here is, if we're not changing workflows and we're doing innovation, then what are we doing? If workflows aren't being discussed prior to tool selection, what's the point? If we're just going to be doing the same thing with a slightly different technology, you got to have a really good cost reason to be using that new technology if you're not changing workflow. So unless it's like a screaming buy of, I'm going to cut costs, if you're doing the same thing with new tech, what are you doing?
Right. And Christina, something that you said is, in your example, would be, IT coming and saying, hey, we selected this tool for you. Here's why we selected it. And I think the biggest miss in that situation is the opportunity to drive user adoption by involving the users in the tool selection process. So, most of the time, everyone is ready to tell you why things aren't working. The pain points are so obvious to these users who have been using their tools day in and day out, or the process day in and day out. So it's being there to listen to those pain points and feeling heard. This goes beyond just the legal industry. I think it's all humans, really, is if you feel that you've been heard, if you have raised your opinion and actually see that change happening. In this case, it's, hey, this isn't working for me. Let's try to work together to find a solution. If you feel like that solution is going to be reflective on the needs that you had, then 100% your adoption is going to go up. These users are excited to see, where this new process will take them because they had a stake in choosing the next tool.
I like that a lot, and I actually am gonna turn it around. I think it's like almost the opposite issue as well, which is like, okay, yes, we should be asking, like, will this solve like for something that you need that's not working? Are we also thinking about like, do they have something that's working? And I don't mean like I've got my crazy filing cabinet, my
Right.
whiteboard, my stickies. Those are the things that like I think Morgan is talking about, like workflow redesign. Are we actually making processes more efficient, whatever? But maybe I have a solution that not only I've been using for a long time, but is like industry standard, or is like I'm doing federal litigation of, patent claims, and like it's literally the only solution that has a direct API connection or what have you to the source that, I need. I literally cannot use anything else. So now like I can't use this thing you've given me because it doesn't do what I need it to do.
Right. It defies any assumption. So a lot of the times when consultants are brought in, it's under the assumption that something is happening. So there have been, up times when we go in and we're talking to a firm that has 9 different practice groups. And we do a survey of how things are going across those different practice groups. And something like litigation, they're having so many problems with their process. There's a lot of like repetitive pieces with pain points that are felt by all of the different, members of that team. And then we'll go and talk to, the sustainability group. And they, again, like very, very regulated. They're doing their tools are working for them. And that's where we can come back and do more of like a retro to the executive teams that brought us in and say, hey, whenever we go to solution now, we're going to head into litigation. And here's all the reasons why. We're going to wait on the sustainability group. And here's the reasons why. And we have all of this data to back us up through these different conversations. But yeah, like you said, it's talking to these people, hearing what they're saying. And then sometimes it's not reacting at all. It's saying, all right, you guys are good to go. We'll come back to you or touch on the small pain points that we heard about, but it's not your process that's the problem right now.
I think that this is our risk to consider for today, is bringing together kind of, and I love this because this is what we all 3 of us do on a regular basis on all of our client projects, but marrying kind of that human-centered design and innovation. It's workflow redesign at its core. It's like, are we thinking about current ways of working? And are we asking people about their needs? I feel like this is kind of, we have, like Morgan said, if we're not doing this, then are we even innovating? Are we even doing anything?
Right. Yeah, and I think even just to back up, when we're talking about workflow redesign, just in the simplest of terms, it's going in and understanding what are people doing today, asking them to go through their process, and then working with them to, solution for them what's going to be the most streamlined or aligned with their priorities, like we said. And in doing that, we don't want to go too deep on these workflows at some point. Like, if you're going to go in and survey all of them, you might go too deep and get too nitty gritty whenever you really need to kind of stay at the 10,000-foot view, especially at the beginning of this discovery, to try to understand who are we actually solving for. If we're brought in to, talk to 24 different teams, or go in and talk to the attorneys and the paralegals and the IT team, there's so many workflows that we're talking about at that point. So you really do have to do this scan up front. And figure out who are we solving for, because we can't solve for every single person at this time.
I think that's a really good call out a really good point. And I'm also thinking about, if I'm an attorney, like a partner at a firm, and I'm having, an hour even of my billable time taken away to engage in this discovery, and I'm being told, and I see you nodding, and again, I feel like we all
Yeah.
have examples that we've seen of this, and I'm being told that, we're going to go through this transformation, and Hike 2 is going to come in and interview you and do these workshops and learn your every single process that you do all day, every day. And then nothing comes of it. Or like there's this roadmap that's like, great, we'll get to you in 24 months.
Right.
It's like, what? Like now, I feel like you wasted my time. I'm frustrated. I don't understand why we did this. And by the time that you get to me, like it may not even be relevant
Yeah.
anymore.
Right. Yeah, things are changing very, very quickly. And that I think comes with upfront work and really having stakeholders who are bought into what we're doing and what we're trying to transform. So the more that the stakeholders understand the business and understand what they are really trying to accomplish, the more successful that these projects will be. We try to come in early and just do executive alignment. So really align IT and the business and also the legal side of the firms, and make sure they know they're all on the same page of why we're here.
Would
Morgan,
you say, so on that like strong executive alignment, would you say a strong vision is important and necessary, or is that something that, kind of through the process you help shape?
Both. At the beginning, we need to define this early. And a lot of the times the vision is defined before we come in. We want to make sure that as we talk to all of the executive stakeholders, they are all aligned. Because we can't just have one person calling the shot, especially because there's so many different units within the firm between IT and business and legal. So yeah, addressing them early. It is nice though, as the consultants, to come in with some sort of an idea of what the vision is. But we're seeing things like reduce manual errors or reduce risk or, up the ROI, everything like that. And if they aren't fully aligned, an example is we came in, thought we would be really streamlining work streams. We went in and talked to all of the executive stakeholders, and the number one thing that we kept hearing was that they wanted to ensure that the culture of the firm stayed at the heart of the firm. And I don't think any of the executives saw that coming, but we had to do this kind of human-centered design exercise to get that out of them. And it really shaped the way that we selected tools and really future-proofed everything for them.
I was literally, and Morgan, you popped in with, as always, like the perfect kind of follow-up question. And I was going to ask you, Morgan, I think about our different roles and the way that each of us come into different, engagements. For you, I think it's really interesting because most of the time, and of course, you come into our projects on, we do business of law, we do practice of law. I think about the most of the engagements and people that you're talking to at conferences and bringing in, having these conversations with are like IT or, data or operational users that are looking for, right? The purchasers, people looking for solutions. And I just think about how we come in, from that, and do those people, whether they're looking for a solution for the practice of law or business of law, are they always aware of the people that might need to be involved in order to really make it successful and think through the human needs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's some nuance here, and I get a little bit of grace in these conversations because when I'm chatting with, even, think of IT and data folks, um, they're not necessarily saying I want to go buy a tool, right? What they're really looking is for guidance and strategy in this quickly ever-changing AI space. And so I think there is a little bit of a difference in a break from the traditional where they're trying to understand how do I approach AI and what does that mean for the business? And so what it means for the business, what it means for the firm, they've already thought of, well, who do I need to include from the practice of law side, from the operations side? And so it is a little bit different than, very very seldom is it a, hey, I want to talk database, right? And we just want to, evaluate different databases. It's more, what's happening with AI? How does it apply to the firm? And IT's already talking with operations. IT's already talking with practice of law. They all understand something needs to change. They all understand technology has a role in it, and they're really looking for guidance. And so, the human-centered design is so spot on because, I think we're lucky when it comes to AI that they understand workflows are going to change, right? They're not looking to do the same with different tech.
I love that. And I feel like you kind of brought us full circle before we wrap up here, back to that tech selection versus, and the versus, right, which we've talked about with again, with a lot of our guests and also here today. But the versus is thinking through what is the actual challenge, what is the business challenge we're trying to solve for before we jump straight into, all right, this is what we need to buy. And I think that's spot on. And I know I've seen, but like you said, even those IT and business stakeholders are thinking about, well, they've already done that. What are the real challenges we're looking to solve here? Um, I think that's as we're about to wrap up, maybe our risk to embrace, which is the alignment of those stakeholders, really understanding the right people early on and how it's going to impact kind of, the success of the project, whether you have that, you said starting with executive alignment. I can't even remember anymore if it was you or Liv, because you both are saying all of the right things, checking off my list here.
It
But
was
yeah.
Liv. It was always Liv.
Okay. I was like,
No,
I
but
really can't even remember.
I guess a question for you, Liv, is, just kind of looking, if risk to embrace is executive alignment, any suggestions or, things that you think are, better predictors of success in getting that alignment? Like, what's work that, a listener might be able to do to help promote executive alignment, or what's something maybe they shouldn't do?
Yeah, yeah. We go in and we ask that question, what does success look like? If we have an 8-week timeline, what will be the most beneficial thing for you at the end of these 8 weeks? And you would be surprised at the answers that we get, because people already know. I mean, at this point, they've already brought in consultants. They have an idea of where they want to head, but whenever you get down onto that individual level, and I think that's why these executive interviews one-on-one is so important, is you don't get 5 different opinions coming at you and people changing their opinions based on what others say. So point blank asking those questions, what does success look like? We always say, if you could wave a magic wand, how would you fix everything right now? And really just making sure all the different sides of the business are being heard, just because the success looks so different depending on who you are and where you sit.
I really like that. What I like about it is it's not asking what success looks like in a board meeting, right? With
Mm-hmm.
everyone, it's individually, what does success look like for this, project initiative for you? And then being able to get alignment at that individual level. I think
Right.
that makes a lot of sense.
I love that. And I was going to say, as we kind of do our recap and actionable advice, as always, like, that's nail on the head. I'm thinking, Liv, of a recent, like, it wasn't even a full engagement. A client that we're already working with asked us to come in and just do some like light human-centered discovery with actual users, with attorneys, on like a budgeting, as they select a budgeting solution. And when Liv asked that question to the actual attorneys, like, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? Like, you would not believe like the things that they're like, oh my God, nobody's ever asked me, whatever. And
Right.
afterwards, the stakeholders were like, oh my God, like, we heard so many things that we did not expect to hear, because we've just didn't think, like, they don't think about these things.
Right, right. I mean, everyone has an opinion. We're all human. So giving someone the opportunity to answer that question in a very one-on-one personal conversation, it's all about the way that you approach it. Everyone is going to have an answer to those questions. So I think especially asking, what does success look like at the end of these 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, however long this project is. But then, what does success look like for your firm? It's a very different question. And it really does help to drive where we're going to end up at the end of the project.
Liv, it has been an absolute pleasure as always. I feel like we've all been traveling, working on projects, we get so, in the weeds of things that we don't always get to come together and have these conversations, which is why Morgan and I started this podcast. But we love having you. It has been seriously such great advice for our listeners. I'm going to pass to Morgan to wrap us up by teasing our next episode and guest.
Yeah, thank you again, Liv. It was lovely talking to you. So our next guest, we're going to have Rachel Shield Williams, and we are going to be talking about CRM and just the evolving need that is CRM within law firms. What is the need, and how is that evolving over time? I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. As we all know, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the CRM space and legal right now. And so, yeah, I can't wait to talk to Rachel Shield Williams on our next call.
Yeah, and I think a perfect segue into, tech selection and how we, make those decisions and whether and how we're considering the human aspect. So thank you so much, Liv. We will definitely be having you back, and we're really excited for our listeners to get to hear this one. With that, thank everybody who's given time out of their day to listen in to Law and Coder, especially Morgan's mom.
Love you, Mom. Yep. Thanks to my mom.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been so great, and I would love to come back.
Absolutely. See you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye.